Hello, viewers and listeners, and welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb. We're happy that you can join us this week. Now, please remember to like and share this week's program. And for those of you over on YouTube, if you have not subscribed to our page, please do us a favor by doing so. Now, following the November election, a very small but vocal minority of Grenadian and Caribbean nationals, including Trinidad and Tobago's opposition leader, the one who said that her country was not the region's ATM, all cheered with glee the current White House occupant's electoral victory. Their theory of the case was that he would do away with so-called wokeness and the wokeness agenda, because to them, so-called wokeness was responsible for inflation, global instability, the rising price of eggs, sky-high fuel prices, a war between Russia and Ukraine, a war between Israel and Palestine, and so much more ills that plague global and national societies. Now, a few weeks ago, I quoted the famous First They Came poem written by Martin Niemöller during Hitler's reign of terror in Germany. The essence of the poem was that as long as the issue does not affect you, then you really do not have a care in the world about it. Now, what the White House occupant has proven, however, is that while you may share the same enemies ideologically, such as the wokesters, eventually his reign of intolerance will hurt and harm you. And by you here, I'm speaking to the Caribbean community who supported this. Now, last week, the incoming Secretary of State in the United States, Marco Rubio, the Cuban American whose parents fled the island following the 1959 Cuban Revolution, and still bitter at the peasant revolt that dislodged their extreme right-wing corporatist government at the time, announced that he was stepping up his anti-communist offensive against the Cuban people by trying to discourage countries from hiring Cuban doctors. Of course, many of those doctors are currently in Grenada, have served Grenada, and will continue to serve Grenada in the future. Now, this is not the first time that Rubio has tried to destroy this program. Several years ago, as a senator from the state of Florida, Rubio introduced a bill to combat the Trafficking of Cuban Doctors Act, claiming that the Cuban program is a disguised form of forced labor. Under this argument that Cuban doctors and other professionals are exploited labor, Rubio announced that anyone and any country involved in exporting professional workers to other countries would suffer sanctions such as visa restrictions and other measures. Of course, for many decades, Grenada and other Caribbean islands benefited from this program. I also suspect that many of the MAGA Caribbean and Grenadian supporters and their families also benefited from this program. Now, Rubio's move, approved by the MAGA oligarchs in his administration, aims to sanction diplomats, officials, and others involved, including their family members. This would not only apply to Cubans, but it would also apply to non-Cubans. Now, in 1963, Cuba sent its first international medical mission to Algeria just after the nation won its independence from France in an arduous war which cost the life of some 1 million Algerians and saw the mass exodus of French colonizers who pillaged and stole from this wealthy African nation. Now, some of those who left Algeria at the time were French medical professionals that staffed the majority of health centers. Now, after meeting the nation's young head of state, Ahmed Ben Bella, at the time, Fidel Castro gave a speech at the inauguration of a new medical school in Havana in 1962 and called on the Cuban people to support a medical mission that would support and contribute to the development of nascent medical infrastructures in countries that were just becoming independent from under the grips of their oppressive colonizers. And this program continued for many decades. Of course, during the COVID-19 pandemic, dozens of brigades of Cuban health professionals were sent to countries across the world, including to Italy, a so-called first world country, depending on the good graces of Cuba. Imagine that. Now, millions of people across the world have received high quality and free medical treatment thanks to Cuban doctors. And many scores of Grenadians can testify to this quality of care. Now, the majority of the international medical missions are coordinated as standing states-to-state partnerships. And thanks to the advanced state of medical professionalization in the Caribbean, this medical mission has been one of the few strategies Cuba has had to obtain some income in the face of the unjust, illegal, and immoral blockade that the United States imposes on Cuba with impunity. Now, likewise, Cuba offers assistance, counseling, and other professional services in fields other than medicine. So we ask, will Caribbean leaders stand in Cuba at this very critical time, a country that has given so much to our islands with so little resources? Or will Caribbean leaders abandon Cuba to maintain their cushy privileges of travel and shopping in the ritzy stores of the United States? Will they risk that visa and give up Cuba in the process? Now, to abandon Cuba in this tumultuous period of world history will be a gross disrespect to the people of that island, which has done so much for Grenadian and Caribbean development. And it would also be a serious capitulation to a far-right authoritarian agenda in the United States. And to you, the small but very vocal minority of far-right MAGA sympathizers, I trust that you will lobby the administration to provide the same quality of life-saving care that Cuba has provided to your compatriots in Grenada and the Caribbean for many decades. Because under this America First agenda, they do not really care about small states like Grenada and other states in the Caribbean. Do I have to remind you about what he referred to us in the first go-around? Remember the S-hole countries comment? Let that be food for thought, folks. And viewers and listeners, this is the Bubb Report. We'll be back for the first segment of the program. Please stand by. On the last episode of this program, we inaccurately stated that Labour Minister Senator Claudette Joseph suggested we contact the Office of the Prime Minister for comment on the matter involving the Public Workers Union dues increase. What the Labour Minister said was that we should contact the Cabinet Office, which is treating with this matter. We also inaccurately listed Mr. Christopher Husbands and Lennox Archibald as current members of the Planning and Development Authority's Board of Directors. The two aforementioned people are no longer associated with the Planning Board. The board now comprises Kendrick Fullerton as chairman, Kenny John as deputy chairman, Marlon Joseph as executive secretary, Philip Alexander, Lachaba Joseph, Christopher Wint, Nicole Gelino, Kevin Blash, Bonnie Williams, Jason Williams, George Skerritt, Kenneth Hazard, and Aria St. Louis, respectively. Mr. Husbands was NAWASA's representative on the board and has not been associated with the PDA since he retired from the authority in October 2023. Therefore, the Bubb Report apologizes to the affected parties for publishing this inaccurate information and regrets any inconvenience it might have caused. We also renew our commitment to responsible journalism's highest ideals and best practices. And whenever mistakes are made, it is our responsibility to correct the record. And we're doing so today. Now the stage is set for Prince George's County's upcoming special election to fill the county executive position vacated by Angela Alsobrooks, who resigned after being elected from the state of Maryland to the U.S. Senate. Also, Brooks won the vacant Senate seat last November to become the first Black woman to be elected senator from the state of Maryland, and only the third Black woman in American history to serve in the United States Senate, all on Democratic tickets. Now, as a result of decisive victories in Delaware and in Maryland, in an otherwise bleak November for Democrats, Lisa Blunt Rochester of Delaware and Angela Alsobrooks of Maryland became the first two Black women to serve in the United States Senate at the same time in American history. The primary election to fill Alsobrooks' seat is scheduled for the 4th of March this year, with the general election to follow on the 27th of May, 2025. Now, 6 candidates have filed to compete for the role, each offering distinct backgrounds and priorities for Maryland's second most populous county. Now, one of the candidates who is vying to fill the seat of county executive is Grenadian American Aisha Braveboy. Braveboy is the current Prince George's County State's Attorney, a position that she has held since 2018. Now, the current state's attorney worked on initiatives including criminal justice reform and diversion programs. Her campaign includes proposals to address systemic challenges in the justice system. And of course, the winners of the special election will serve the remainder of Alsobrooks' term, which concludes in December of 2026. Now, acting county executive Tara Jackson is currently filling the role, but has stated that she does not plan to run again. The upcoming election will also determine leadership for a county navigating challenges with rising housing costs, a serious budget deficit in the state of Maryland, a looming set of budget cuts that will affect the county's priorities, high property taxes, an unemployment crisis that may emerge as a result of thousands of federal employee layoffs, crime, and other issues of economic growth. Now, voters will have the opportunity to select a leader tasked with addressing these issues at a critical time in American history. Braveboy was born in Washington, D.C., to her father, Cuthbert, and mother, Norman Braveboy, who migrated to the United States from St. Patrick, Grenada. She graduated from Largo High School and later attended the University of Maryland, College Park, where she earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Government and Politics in 1997. And Braveboy earned her Juris Doctor of Laws degree from the Howard University's School of Law in the year 2000, worked as an attorney in the private and public sectors before becoming actively involved in frontline politics in 2002. And of course, this interview with State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy was recorded earlier last week. State's Attorney Braveboy, welcome to the Bubb Report.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, we know that this is a very busy campaign time for you. So
Yes.
We'll get into it. So let's first talk about your endorsement. Of course, the governor of the state of Maryland, himself a history-making governor with Caribbean roots as well, has endorsed you for the seat of county executive. So let us talk about that endorsement and how would that endorsement affect the upcoming primary?
Well, it's a tremendous endorsement. Let me tell you, I can't tell you how significant it is, because oftentimes when individuals achieve a certain level of office, they don't what they consider to endorse down ballot, right? They don't necessarily endorse those positions that may not be of equal kind of impact as theirs. And so typically what you'll see are governors endorsing senators or members of Congress or people to succeed them, but they may not endorse at the local level. So for the governor to do that, that was pretty significant. I think it highlights the strong relationship and partnership that we have, and really the effectiveness that my office and certainly me in this position as a state's attorney have shown, that impressed him enough to say, you know what, I'm going to buck the norm in this case and endorse someone who I believe will be a tremendous asset to the county and to the state. So that made me feel really, really good. And I'm grateful to have the support of another Caribbean American.
No, absolutely. And again, just as a follow up to that question on Governor Westmore's endorsement. Now, would this endorsement help or hurt you? You know, they talk about whether or not you should sometimes run away. You have politicians running away from endorsements, depending on the popularity or lack thereof of whether it's the president or whether it's the governor. And the reason I'm asking this question again, it has to do with the fact that the Governor Moore has proposed, and the governor's office have proposed some budget cuts for the state of Maryland that will directly impact Prince George's County residents. So with that endorsement, how do you intend to, I suppose, circle that square that circle to speak to those budget cuts that will be coming to the county?
Well, look, everyone has to face what is called reality. The reality right now is that the state is in a budget deficit. The county has a structural deficit. So we're all making decisions on what to cut. And so the reality is that there will be cuts. But this governor is smart. He's very strategic in terms of ensuring that those priorities that he believes are important to move Maryland and Prince George's County forward, that he is funding. But you can't fund everything. And the reality is that we all have to, make decisions and deal in reality. And so I think most Marylanders understand that there is a reality that we are facing a budget crisis. And what they want us to do in a budget crisis isn't to say, oh, we'll just fund everything. What they want us to do is make decisions on ensuring that we are taking care of public safety, that we are investing in our future, which is our educational system, but also not neglecting things like our seniors, our government services like trash pickup and cleanup and snow removal and other things. So what they want us to do is balance all of those interests and make strategic decisions. A very popular governor. He has a close to 60% approval rating overall in the state. Here in Prince George's County, I'm certain it's much higher. So his endorsement is very significant. We've been doing well as a campaign. We have been leading in all of the recent polls, but the only important poll is that taken on election day. And the governor's support, I think, bolsters us, puts us in a position of strength, further strength, and having someone like him affirming this campaign helps us with maybe those undecided voters who haven't figured it out, but they like him, they trust him, and hopefully they will be convinced to support me.
Absolutely, and that's a very important point. Now, let us talk about your accomplishments as a state's attorney, and how would those accomplishments serve as a sort of your manifesto going into this new role? Because of course you've been in the role of state's attorney. You've worked in county government, so you know how county government works. But you're also coming up against a very deep bench, shall we say, of other candidates. Mr. Baker, who served before, and they all have wealth of experience. So how do you intend to stand out among those other candidates?
Well, I have stood out throughout this campaign because we've run a very smart campaign based on the facts, as well as my history of serving both in the public and private sector. So the way that I stand out is that I am the only candidate that has worked in all three branches of government: the executive branch earlier in my career, the legislative branch as a state delegate, and now in the judicial branch as state's attorney. In addition to that, I have private sector experience. I have been a small business owner myself, so I know those struggles. And I've also been in the private sector, working for one of the largest healthcare organizations, serving the youngest among us here in Prince George's County, Children's Hospital. And while I was there, I actually led the effort to move a outpatient center to Woodmore Town Center, which it's where it sits today. So I understand how to work with government from the outside. Obviously, I know how to work government from the inside as well. So I believe I've stood out throughout this campaign. In terms of my accomplishments as state's attorney, let me tell you, we have an over 90% homicide conviction rate. We have a 91% gun conviction rate. We are getting very significant sentences in all of our major categories of crime that have impacted us. And we have now, last year, actually, we saw a 40% reduction in carjackings. And this year, there's a 62% reduction in carjackings. So we are sending a very strong message in our courthouse about how we feel about people who would offend our community. And, so we have a lot to be proud of. Crime is going down and convictions are going up, and sentences are now fair and appropriate for the type of crime that has been committed. In addition to the work that I've done to keep people safe, to get justice, to hold people accountable, I've also implemented programs and policies to help individuals who deserve a second chance. And I'm very proud of that as well. We have over 80 individuals who had life or life equivalent sentences who are now home. And none of them have returned back to the justice system because we take our time to ensure that we are giving them the type of support that they need. So I have a lot to be proud of in the work that I've done over the last 6 years. And I look forward to continuing to serve this county as county executive.
And of course, you preempted the next question I was going to ask, and that has to do with public safety in the county. Of course, as you did mention, there was a decrease in homicide. Again, the data shows
in all categories of crime. Actually, this year we're down 30% in every category of
all
crime.
Across the board. So yeah, we're talking about carjackings as well. That dropped by 30%.
Carjackings, assaults,
robberies decreased by 13%. Assaults, there's also a decrease in there. But of course, auto thefts has been a concern for the county.
There too. A decrease
and a decrease there as well. So we've seen those numbers going down. Now, how would you treat with the issue of crime in the county, even though while it does show a downward spiral trend, of course, some residents may still be concerned that it continues to be an issue?
Well, I'm always concerned about crime because one crime is one too many. If that crime occurs and it impacts you, then you don't feel safe. So I'm worried about everybody. But I also have to be realistic. We are going to have individuals who commit offenses. Our goal, obviously, is to reduce the likelihood that individuals will commit offenses. And if they do, we will send a strong message when they do. But that's one of the reasons why I'm running for exec, because I recognize that there are some factors that lead people into the criminal justice system, including a lack of quality education, and really attending school so that they can graduate on time. Also, a lack of mental health care and services in our county. Many people who end up in the justice system, in fact, 30% of them who are in our local jails right now are on some type of psychotropic drug, where our correctional department is caring for people who have real diagnosed mental illness. And so being able to have a more robust mental health treatment plan in our county is important to me. And in my role now, I'm reacting to things that have not gone well, right? I'm reacting to people who may be homeless. I'm reacting to people who may have food insecurities. And so they're stealing from stores, and we want to hold them accountable, but we also have to understand that they have real needs, and being able to help address some of those needs is important as well. In my role as state's attorney, my budget is limited. I don't control all of these agencies that could actually assist people, but as county executive, I can absolutely do that.
Now, let us talk about property taxes. Of course, we know that Prince George's County has one of the highest property taxes in all of the statewide in Maryland. And of course, I'm raising this question against the backdrop of these threats, and of course, not only threats, but a delivery, sadly so, on federal employee layoffs. A lot of Marylanders in Prince Georgians, a lot of Prince Georgians are in fact employees of the federal government. How will we treat with dealing with the issue of property taxes first and foremost? And secondly, for the homeowners who are working with the federal government, who have mortgages, who have responsibilities with their homes. What measures does the county have in place specifically for them, if in fact those layoffs were to go ahead?
I mean, right now, obviously, I don't control county government, so I have limited input in what happens at this time.
Yeah.
However, I am working with members of the state legislature on a bill that would create an emergency assistance fund for individuals who may be impacted by layoffs or reduction in service or force at the federal level. It is really sad. Let me just say this. This is the first time in my history, just looking at and dealing with politics, and really as far back as I can remember as a child, that we have a government, a federal government, whose goal is to pick winners and losers, whose goal is outwardly, not policies that may impact people here or there. This is a very strategic and very transparent a decision by our government to pick winners and losers, to make haves and have-nots, to make people scared and afraid. This is purposeful, and we've never seen this, I think, in our lifetime, and I hope to never see it again, actually. But we have to respond. We have over 30,000 federal workers in Prince George's County, not to even talk about the number of contractors as well as grant recipients who rely on federal funds. And so when the president announced that they wanted to freeze spending except for Medicaid and Social Security, that directly impacted even my office. We receive federal funds to pay for domestic violence victim assistance programs, including emergency housing. So we're talking about freezing funds potentially that would have made our victims less safe. And the good thing was that courts intervened, and that freeze was actually determined not to be lawful because Congress had already passed the budget, passed the spending.
It was already appropriated, yeah.
And it was yes, and it was appropriated, and there is a separation of powers for a reason. So so that was great. But in the future, we don't know what he's going to propose. And again, it's not coming from a place, it appears, of compassion and understanding that government is not a business. Government is supposed to be there to help take care of people as well. So again, this is the first time in my history that I'm aware of that we have a president and an administration that is not focused on caring about people, but more so focused on assisting just a small, like 1%, or really not even 1%, because I don't believe we have 1% in terms of billionaires, but a fraction of 1% of those who will benefit from the tax cuts and all of the new policies. So this is really a shame, honestly. And I hope that, we come together as a country, as a people, whether we're Republican, Democrats, independents, Green Party, what have you, we come together and just demand that whoever is running for our party's nomination care about the people who they want to represent.
Mm-hmm. And let us just as a follow-up to this, have you really assessed what the economic fallout might look like for the county? If in fact so many of those federal workers in residents of Prince George County are laid off?
I don't have access to all of the data with respect to these workers, so I don't want to give you, numbers that are incorrect. So I'm not going to be able to fully answer that now. But should I become county executive, access to more data, more information on the number? I know that we have over 30,000 federal workers. Many of them are married couples, but some of them are single. Many of them are property owners. So these are people who are paying those taxes into Prince George's County. So if they fail, the county is going to fail. So we can't allow that to happen. So a couple of things that I had, proposed doing at the county level to assist, in addition to working with the state to provide emergency financial assistance is to help some of these individuals reposition themselves in the local government and or state government. So there are a number of available positions in local and state government that many of our federal workers can qualify for. So we will host career fairs and provide opportunities for them to enter county or state government. In addition to that, we have universities who are also hiring, and many of our federal workers have expertise in areas that could be very critical to advancing our universities and their mission. And then lastly, I will say at this time, we have a lot of procurement opportunities at the local level. And so some of our federal employees and or federal contractors that may find themselves losing their federal contracts or their employment may want to be entrepreneurial and want to provide services to local government. So we have to be open to expanding the pool that we pull from in terms of local procurement.
Mm-hmm. We have two final questions, and I'll go over to closing comments because I want to respect your time. But one of the concerns that residents have raised, especially those who are entrepreneurial, speaks to just the red tape that's involved with opening small businesses. Yes. In preparation for this conversation, I was listening to a small business owner who said that she went to the neighboring county in Montgomery County and was able to open a business, get all of the application done within 3 months or less, maybe. What do you intend to do to treat with that issue of red tape?
I absolutely intend to look at best practices from different governments around the region. And then we're just going to have to adopt those protocols, because it's not as if we're getting a better product or a better build out because of our lengthy process. It really just means that we are causing ourselves as a government, not to be able to collect the tax revenue benefits from that company making money. And that is a shame. So we just have to be smart. And one of the smartest things to do is look at what's working and duplicate. And I don't have a problem with that.
Duplicate what's working. I like that. It's just like research in so many ways. Now let us talk about, of course, the White House occupant in D.C., just down the street in D.C., indicated that his administration will be adopting a zero tolerance policy towards so-called sanctuary cities that will not cooperate with immigrations and customs enforcement in the removal of nonviolent, undocumented immigrants. Now, we have seen what has transpired with respect to immigration enforcement since his assumption of office, against the backdrop also of federal threats to upend the safety of undocumented immigrants in so-called sanctuary cities. Are those conversations you have been having? And how will you confront, as county executive, a federal government that would be coming to say that we are going to come with a carrot and stick approach that says, okay, we are going to withhold funds if, in fact, you do not partner with ICE in mass deportation activities?
Well, look, this administration has to be honest with people. When we started down this road, this new president said that they wanted to focus on getting out the worst of the worst. Those who are committing violent crimes in our community should not be here. And we are all in agreement with that. People who have committed violent crimes here, they absolutely must go. And I have worked with ICE in my current role as state's attorney. My goal, of course, always is to hold the individual accountable for the crime that they commit here. They then serve their sentence and then they go bye-bye. I don't have a problem with that. But what he's talking about is something that he absolutely said wouldn't happen, which is that people who have no criminal charges except for they may have overstayed their visa, or they may have entered the country undocumented, and so now they have a they have an appointment with ICE that they may have missed, who are otherwise law abiding. When we started down this road, he said that those are not the people that he's focused on or interested in, but it's these violent criminals. And I think we all agreed with that. But now it's something different. Now, this new policy really affects kids who are in school, many of whom have parents who may not be documented. They themselves may not be documented, and they have to go to school. Like, there's a law that basically says if you are between the ages of 5 and 18 and you reside in the state of Maryland and you have not completed your high school diploma or equivalent, that you are required to attend school. So we want them to come to school. We want them to feel comfortable in our schools. And many may be concerned if the policy has shifted to anyone can get deported. Then we have places of worship that are sacred places where people should feel safe, and people should be able to exercise the freedom of religion. And so those spaces have never really been places that anyone thinks, ICE is going to come and raid. Our government buildings, our courthouses, people come to the court to get justice. My concern is that victims who may not be documented won't seek justice, which will be a shame, because we have to ensure that people who are being brutalized, abused, potentially raped, or other crimes have been committed against them, that they have access to justice. But if you make it intimidating for them, if you scare them, they might not seek it. And so I think we're setting up a scenario in our country that no one wants, which is that, crimes will be committed under a cloak and a mask because the victims won't feel like they can come forward. That is not America. I can't stress to you enough how disappointed and disheartened and honestly disgusted that I am that this is where our country is at this point. And as a leader in the justice system, I have to tell you there is a better way. Again, people who have committed violent crimes, yes, they have lost their right to even assert wanting to be an American. I get that. But for others who came here for the American dream and who have acted in a way that comports with our standards as a society, making them scared to work, to send their kids to school, to pray, that's something about that's un-American.
Absolutely. And of course, we will continue to see how that unfolds. I mean, we saw recently with the whole congestion pricing issue in New York and that was something. That was really something. But finally, State's Attorney Brave Boy, of course, this program, the Bubb Report, is watched by a lot of Grenadians and a lot of Caribbean people here in Prince George's County who live in Maryland, as well as in Grenada. It's actually aired on the Grenada Broadcasting Network and WPG-10 television in Grenada. Of course, you are of Grenadian heritage from St. Patrick. Yes. And so talk to us about that. And can you speak to the Grenadian diaspora and Grenadians at home, especially those who have the ability to vote for you, why they should vote for a Grenadian daughter in the diaspora?
Vote for me now. I'm excited because when I look at our island of maybe 130,000 people, to think that the daughter of the island can ascend to being county executive of a county with nearly 1 million people, it's unbelievable in so many ways. But it is the American dream and story of my father coming here for a better life and more opportunities, not only for himself, but his children as well. And, I feel like I am, an example of what is possible. And so I take that very, very seriously in all that I do. That's why I always talk about my heritage. And I'm very proud to be Grenadian. I'm proud to be Caribbean. I'm proud to be African. I'm proud to be an American and a Prince Georgian. You know,
Yeah.
I'm proud of
And
all.
a bison. You're also
And a
Howard.
bison and
And
a
we are
terrapin.
both we are both bison. So
Yes, go
HU.
Bisons. I'm also I went to law school at Howard. I went
At
to
Howard,
undergraduate
yeah. Yeah.
university of Maryland, and I'm an adjunct professor at Bowie State University. So I have relationships with lots of the schools in
Yeah.
or around this area.
Mhm.
And what I want to say is that, you know, anything and everything is possible, and that the values that my father and mother taught me, but the resilience of an immigrant coming here and determining that, you know what, I can build a life here and I can make sure that my children achieve their dreams. That's what I'm an example of. You know, I'm an example of a father who showed me hard work, you know, showed me how to value those who might work for me. My father was a manager. And so when I became state's attorney, I put my employees and their issues and their needs first in all of the decisions that I made. That's why I was able to raise their salaries in a short period of time by nearly 35%. That was unheard of, but it was because I focused on making their lives better. And that's, I feel really good about that, along with all the other accomplishments of my office. I feel good that I was good to the people who work for me. That means a lot to me.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Braidboy, any final comments before we go to the next segment?
Look, please, between now and March 4th, I really need you to vote. You can return your ballot in the mail. If you did not get a ballot, you can vote in person starting on February 26th through March 3rd. And then, of course, on March 4th is election day, and you can vote then as well. And you can go to sites all across the county. They are advertised on our county's Board of Elections website. So if you go to the Board of Elections website, you'll see all of the places where you can vote, either early voting starting next Wednesday, the 26th through March 3rd, which is Monday. And then, of course, on election day, you can vote as well. But we really need everyone to come out to vote, and hopefully they're voting for the second name on the ballot, Aisha Brave Boy. Can't forget Brave Boy. And I hope that we can, of course, celebrate victory on the 4th.
State's Attorney Braidboy, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report this week. Viewers and listeners, that was State's Attorney Aisha Braidboy, one of the candidates vying to sit in the office of county executive in the Democratic primary that's happening on March 4th. This is the Bubb Report. We'll be right back for the second segment of the program. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to the second segment of this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Now, International Women's Day is marked on the 8th of March every year. It was first recognized by the United Nations in 1977, though it has earlier roots in the labor movements of the early 20th century. Now, the theme for this year's International Women's Day is Accelerate Action. And this theme recognizes that at the current state of progress, it will take 134 years to reach full gender parity, according to the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum calls for increased momentum and urgency in addressing the systematic barriers and biases that women confront. The pandemic, according to the forum, set back gender parity in the workplace, with women disproportionately leaving or being excluded from the workforce in certain sectors. Meanwhile, women remain underrepresented in leadership roles and industries, including technology, where the gender gap has been slow to close. Now, in Grenada and in the Caribbean region, experts say that a major obstacle that women confront is the Caribbean's development model does not yet utilize the full extent of its human capital. Too often, women are not part of the Caribbean's development equation, with gender disparities limiting economic opportunities for women and thus holding back economic growth across the region. As Caribbean countries navigate the global financial landscape, governments should look at how increasing economic empowerment opportunities for women can be a new development tool for the region. And here to make sense of International Women's Day 2025, Lady Anande Trotman Joseph, who is the Public Relations Officer of the Grenada National Organization of Women, as well as Tamara Savory. I hope I got it right this time, Tamara. Savory, I'm getting it wrong again. Tamara Savory, who is a floor member of the Grenada National Organization of Women. Ladies, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report, and happy International Women's Day in advance.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr.
Yes,
Keller.
yes, absolutely. Now let us talk about this year's International Women's Day, the theme and the relevance of the theme, and how that theme is universal and how it applies to Grenada. I'll start with you, Lady Joseph.
Okay, so we heard quite a big mouthful about the team, and it seems to be very development focused.
Yes.
And I would start by saying that we are happy to be representing GNOW, and GNOW is an umbrella organization which represents many of the women's organizations across Grenada, as well as individual members. And we really celebrate with the women of Grenada International Women's Day. We ask our men and boys and brothers and sons and everyone to celebrate this time, because really and truly in celebrating the women and girls of Grenada, we acknowledge the contribution of 50% and sometimes a little more of our population to nation building and development in the context in which you are speaking about. So we're happy and excited to be here and part of this conversation. I'm happy to be a representative voice and face. And as you look at myself and my sister Tamara, you can see that this is an intergenerational organization, as we, the sisters who are a little more advanced in age, I don't want to say old because we don't own that, but we are working with the sisters who are a little younger in age, because this is what it is all about. We have to build Grenada. We have to develop Grenada together. We have to have intergenerational conversations, intergenerational efforts, work together in a way that we can communicate with each other without barriers, but really with a heart of sisterhood and love and a desire for the empowerment of Grenada's women and girls. So this is who we at GNOW are all about. This is who we are.
Yeah. And Ms. Savory, I'm getting this correct this time around. I do not want to be accused of being sexist at all. But let us talk about, of course, the demographic profile of Grenada shows a very youthful population, very, very youthful population. I believe, based on the last census, a majority of the population, based on the male-female ratio, happen to be females. Yes, and so you represent to me part of that younger demographic of Grenadians who have gotten involved in the Grenada National Organization of Women. Talk to us about why you got involved with GNOW, and talk to us about the sector of women that you represent in Grenada, whose interests are served on the board of GNOW.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bubb. And it's such a pleasure to be here alongside Lady Druckmann Joseph and representing GNOW as a floor member. So my journey into GNOW started 12 odd years ago. And I started as a representative in my late teens of the Girl Guides Association of Grenada, which it just so happens that now I am its chief commissioner. And GNOW is, we call her the mother organization. It's an umbrella organization. So when we speak about GNOW, when we talk about GNOW's activities, its history, we're not only speaking of the famous Grenadian women who have been at the helm of GNOW, but it's also speaking of the member organizations. So we have quite a few member organizations that are part of GNOW. Traditionally, we have the GUT's Women's Committee, the Grenada Netball Association, the Grenada Nurses Association, which our president, Mrs. Kendra Klein, represented for many years, the Grenada Homemakers Associations, of course, the Girl Guides Association of Grenada, Optimus International Grenada, and the list goes on. We also have the women's arm of the New National Party, so it is an umbrella organization that really focuses on women in general from all walks of life. And as you mentioned, even the executive right now, we have a lot of younger persons serving, because GNOW is also concerned about succession planning and being able to not only have women who are at the helm of the organization, but hearing the views of the younger populace, of the young women in society who are living, who are working in Grenada, experiencing some of the issues, and also being advocates for ourselves. So it's really a really proud time for me in my life, in my professional career, in my life as a volunteer and as an advocate, that many years ago in my late teens, I was representing Girl Guides on GNOW. And now, after the years of seeing how things are done, of learning or of gleaning from these amazing women, now I'm able to also contribute of my time and my services to this organization. So it's a bit of a full circle effect. And this is what GNOW is all about. It's about women in different stages of their lives experiencing what womanhood is and being advocates for the issues that we see that are prevalent here in our tri-island state.
Yeah, and Lady Joseph, let me bring you back in here to pick up on what Tamara just articulated here, just about the broad-based coalition that is involved with GNOW and what that means for the viability and sustainability of the organization.
Well, because we are broad-based, and because at times, like any other organization, there may be lulls. COVID, for example, challenged not only GNOW, but challenged many of our national and regional and even global organizations in terms of persons just struggling to survive for themselves. And it impacted volunteerism. And of course, we at GNOW, some of us, and that is where the sustainable leadership came in. We, the sisters who had been there for some time, we put our shoulders to the wheel because we knew that we had to have a reset of transformational leadership where our sisters like Tamara and our incoming President Kendra, the head of the Grenada Nurses Association, the younger folks, and Nell, who's our secretary, a whole new generation. We wanted them to come in to help reset the organization. So being broad-based, we were able to reach in and connect and communicate with the other organizations and say to them, yes, okay, we're past COVID now. We cannot be desensitized. we're losing ground in terms of the fight towards achieving equity and equality of women and girls and even boys in Grenada. And we know that they're the Girl Guides, but the Girl Guides are a sister organization or an ally organization with the Boy Scouts, for
With the
example.
Boy Scouts, yeah.
So we're saying all of this because this is the kind of reach we have as a wider umbrella organization. Netball, we were shocked to find out that there's a male who is actually the head of the Netball Association as its steward at the moment. So that is telling us the importance that, yes, women and girls need to be protected, and we are continuing to advocate for that, but we are also advocating for allyship. And in doing so, we are working to address unconscious biases in our society, which mean that gender does not mean women. Gender means our respective roles that we, whether we are born female sex or male sex, it's about the roles we play in our society to arrive at balance, gender equality in all that we do. So this is what it means to be part of a broad-based movement that is linked not only internally to the national umbrella, but we are linked and have been working over the years with the Caribbean Women in Leadership. Many years ago, I'm a regional activist for gender empowerment and equality, and I have been working with the Caribbean Women in Leadership as its past chairperson, and just handed over after we administered a grant of 2 million Canadian dollars to help set up chapters across the Caribbean where women can advocate for transformational leadership, transformational gender leadership, and sustainable leadership. We have brought this to Grenada and we work with GNOW, and GNOW has been a beneficiary for over maybe a decade, when many of the past women leaders, especially in political life, such as Mrs. Franca Bernardine, Brenda Hood, the present Emmeline Pear, Delma Thomas, Clarice Charles, so many were involved in receiving training in collaboration between Civil and GNOW. And in turn, these women who were trained through that process went out and mentored. We've had situations where, for example, Honorable Franca Bernardine, through the auspices of this dual organizational workings between national to regional, would have mentored a minister in Dominica. Honorable Clarice Charles mentored a minister in Antigua, and so on and so on. So this is what being broad-based is all about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, in preparing for this conversation today, I was actually very taken aback and very shocked and surprised, honestly, at how much of the gender equality targets was set back by COVID-19. And again, I just want to reorient our audience to those targets in the context of the UN sustainable goals, the 17 sustainable goals. And it says this: the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted by all UN member states in 2014, provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and planet now and into the future. Now, one of the 17 goals for sustainable development, which I believe is goal number 5, speaks to gender equality. And it speaks to achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. Ladies, and I will start with you there, Tamara. For this one, we are 5 years away from 2030. That's just, and really, it shows you that time is, life is short. Time is short, right? Mm-hmm. And so let us talk about how COVID set back those gender equality targets. Is that something that you've given thought to?
Yes, we have as an organization. This is one of the discussions that we've had. And one of the ways in which we have tried to tackle this is really revamping GNOW. And I don't know how many of the public would be aware of how COVID impacted gender equality, but as it relates to gender based violence, for example, because persons of both genders lived in the same space, because persons were at home more. The emergency services in many countries, including Grenada, it was a bit overwhelmed at certain times with having to respond to COVID-19 and all the other ailments and so that came about during that time, because there was a restriction in movement, etc., because there was a lot of mental forces that we had to contend with. There was a lot of anxiety and depression and worry that happened because of, not only was it a medical issue, the socioeconomic consequences of COVID-19, that pandemic, it was widespread. And it was an amalgamation of all of these different forces, so that it influenced the level of gender-based violence that occurred during that time. So because persons were within their homes, many persons were out of work, it was really stressful. The instances of gender-based violence, there was a spike during that time. And because of COVID-19, as well, a lot of the preventative programs, the programs on sensitizing the public, on construction of safe houses, etc., all of these different methods and mediums for prevention and for care of gender-based violence, those were deterred. And that is why there was a real spike during that time. And that is why the 2030 agenda has been, is a bit further away, because of that we can say it was basically like a 5-year period where things were a lot slower in the preventative measures, as well as there was an acceleration of instances of GBV because of how stressed everyone was, and because a lot of the preventative measures, sensitization, etc., was not really getting to the public. So that is really a significant time frame that we've had to see, to think about, and to strategize from, so that now, as we're approaching 2030, we can accelerate our action. And that is one of the reasons why the theme for this year is that we accelerate action for gender equality.
Mm-hmm. And Lady Joseph, I want you to pick up on that. You know, again, looking at the data and everything like that, I can see why such a theme, accelerate action, is so relevant, given what Tamara just articulated here.
Yes. Accelerating is one thing, and that is why we need the youth, and that is why for us at GNOW, we really are very supportive to our next generation. And because I've been involved in leadership training over the last few decades of my professional life, I, along with others, understand that it's one thing to hand over the baton to the next generation. That is supposedly transformational. Mm-hmm. However, I also understand, along with my others who have been doing training, my other, colleagues, that we have to not just speak to transformational leadership, but if we're talking sustainable development goals, we are talking sustainability. And that is why, as much as I'm happy to do something else, maybe even go to the beach some days and sit out and look out, I have taken time out of my own personal life, because I believe that to whom much is given, much is expected. And therefore, if we are going to sustain organizations like GNOW and its affiliates, if we're going to synergize national organizations with regional to global organizations, there must be some glue. So some of us have to understand the lessons that we have learned from implementing and operationalizing the transformational Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular, Goal 5, to know that we can't just pass the baton and walk off the field. The persons who we are training for this relay need coaching, they need support, they need people who believe in them, people who have the experience, they need the mentors. When they too flag with tiredness, as we may have also done at some point, they will get the energy of experience. The experienced ones will get the energy of the youth and the transformational determination that the younger generation of women leaders have. So for us, this is transformational leadership going into sustainable leadership as we approach 2030 and beyond. These are the lessons of leadership, because we are a leadership organization which is trying to impact policy, which is trying to walk the walk and not just talk the talk, as we positively influence girls and women and boys and men in Grenada.
And I'm going to pick up on this here. Now, let us talk about the context of Grenada. What are some specific targets that you feel as if that we need to accelerate action on, ladies? Samara, you want to take a stab at that?
Yes. And here in Grenada, we, as Grenadian women, we understand the Grenadian context. We live here, we work here, we have our families here. And one of the things that Gina is so proud to declare today is that we have been implementing a number of activities, even within the last 12 months, that we're very proud of. And some of the targets that we've had includes community engagement. Recently, we completed a project that was funded by CUSO International. And what it focused on was having gender-based violence community engagement. So that included interacting with the public, understanding their views on gender-based violence, on gender equality, on gender relations. Additionally, we held an education forum. So a few persons representing our member organizations, also known as our affiliates, so different organizations, including, Girl Guides, nurses, netball, etc., some students from TAMCC, educating them on gender issues, to understand what we are really talking about when we speak about gender issues and how that relates to the Grenadian context. Additionally, there was part of the program that focused on influencer training, speaking to influencers, social media influencers, so that later on they can also be one of those who would spread the message of advocacy against gender-based violence. We have had a media campaign. So these have been the target methods that we've been using to get the word across. Because it's not only just about girls and women, as Lady Anande, is showing, is that we care about everyone. Everyone is impacted by gender issues and women's rights and women's issues. So, for example, when an instance of gender-based violence occurs, there are also socioeconomic factors that come into play. A woman who may have been abused may need to skip work for a while. What about her children? What about those who are depending upon her? What about the organizations, the companies that she is working with? They're losing income during that time when she's away, when she has to recuperate, etc. So all of these. What about the perpetrators as well? They're losing time from work. They may be in a state of anxiety. They may need to may get into the justice system. All of these things. So these are some of the areas that we really want persons, the Grenadian public, to think about, to see that it's not just about a physical abuse. It's not just about a bruise on the face. It is all about how is it that us as human beings, as Grenadians who are working towards transforming our tri-island state, how can we, whether through understanding the concepts, the ideas, the generational, the cultural, the historic ideologies that tell us that women do this versus men doing that, how do all of these different ideologies impact the way that we behave, the way that we perceive each other, and the way that we work together? So that is what the Grenada National Organization of Women, through its member organizations, through its executive bodies, trying to do, is to really bringing to the forefront that, hey, this is not just a one issue. It's not just a bruise. It's not just about a march in the street saying that we need to protect women. No, every single aspect of our life and our livelihoods can be impacted by these issues. So that is what we want to do. That is how we're accelerating action. And one of the main points of that, the main methods of that, is speaking about it, speaking in the public spaces about it.
Getting that message out, so important. And I'm sure, Ms. Joseph, that's part of what you do as well in respect of getting that message out on platforms like these, of course.
Of course. And if I can, I would like to just follow up a little bit about some of what we're talking about, what we as a people, women, girls, men, boys need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And I will just touch briefly, following on from my sister Tamara, about gender-based violence. This is a problem that a lot of money is being thrown after right here in Grenada. The UN Women, the European Union, there have been spotlight projects and millions of dollars coming to us to try and solve this. Yet it's a vexing problem. It continues. There's a lot of what we call intimate partner violence, but really and truly it's a cultural problem. And we, not only women but men, we need to own this problem. We have to understand that this is deep, deep rooted. And we have to speak about it. We have to be honest about it. It starts very often here in Grenada. We as women's organization, and we are a member organization too of another umbrella organization, the Grenada Coalition on the Rights of the Child. We have had reports of babies being sexually abused. Imagine the kind of scar on a little baby girl. Even before she's formed, her psyche knows that she's being violated sexually. You can imagine the kind of scarring this is. We of GNO, we have done some surveys with others, and it is guaranteed that a minimum of at least 1 in every 3 women and or girls in Grenada has been sexually violated in some way or the other. Let's think about this.
Yeah.
And what it means for the healthy relationships between our women and men, our boys and girls. Why should we be afraid of each other? Why shouldn't we be easy, respectful, loving, truly loving with one another? These are things that we as citizens have to really think about. We have to change our own behaviors. We have to take accountability. We have to change the old ways of doing things. It doesn't just start with the actual acts that are being translated into over half of every offense that is being heard as a crime to be tried in the courts of Grenada in the criminal assizes. Every term, over and over, every year, sometimes in excess of 50% of the cases are about sexual interference. What is it that we are not addressing? So we at GNO, it's tiring, but we have to keep talking. This is what we call continuous advocacy. Acceleration sometimes means persistence. We cannot stop speaking. even in spite of our own discomfort about it. There is street harassment. Sisters, how many of you, especially you, the younger ones walking down the road, I have seen it. I drive cars slowing down and pulling close to our teenagers in school uniforms while the guys are, making suggestive comments and encouraging the little girls who sometimes could be their daughters to come in, promising them what? There's sexual harassment of the older ones in our workplaces, promises of all kinds of favors for sex. These are practical discussions that we need to have.
Mm-hmm.
But even in having this discussion, I have to remind us women that with rights come responsibilities too.
Mm-hmm.
And working with a younger group of women and girls, and I've had the wonderful opportunity to do this when I, quite a few years ago now, was chairperson of the Grenadian National Coalition on the Rights of the Child. And we worked with a teenage cohort of adolescents. We had to work with young people to remind them of their self-worth, about their self-love, and tell them you can say no. Our society, we have been socialized that women just submit to men, females to males. We just go along with whatever. We've also had men advocating that women have become and girls have become very aggressive towards them, even sexually, entrapping and ensnaring them into difficulties. So we at Gino, we speak realistically, we speak authentically because we are of the society, and we go and work with many different societies or communities rather in our nation from time to time. And girls, young ladies, be authentic. Ask ourselves, do our brothers, do your potential bays, do they really want the fake hair, the fake nails, and the fake body? Or do they want a true Grenadian loving woman that can have a sustainable relationship with not only a physical relationship, but as a sister, as a Grenadian sister and brother, as Grenadian citizens who together can build a nation? We have to have these conversations too as well when we're talking about our development and our nation building. Let's get authentic in these conversations.
Very, very important conversations to have there. And as you were talking about just how much happens in respect of what happens to babies, this is just so glaring. What happens to young women? Now, I believe it was last year, the Caribbean director of UN Women said the total cost of violence against women and girls in Grenada in 2019 was 171.66 million EC dollars, right? Which represents 5.24% of the country's GDP in that year. Now, Broda was referencing a national study on the economic costs of violence against women and girls in Grenada. Miss Savory, I will start with you. Miss Savory, that is, I will start with you there. Let us talk about this data. And of course, people might see this big aggregate number, but let us disaggregate it a bit and speak about the implications of that data and that particular number and what it means for women in Grenada.
Yes, so I was alluding to that when I was speaking a bit earlier, because it's expensive. When there is gender inequality, it is expensive. So breaking down that cost of $63 million, for example, the services cost from that total is $27.1719 million. Health costs, which includes care for bruises and for wounds, therapy. Then, of course, there is the justice, the judicial part of gender-based violence or gender inequality challenges and crimes. So law enforcement and court costs was almost $12 million. Then there's the specialized services costs, which includes maintenance of safe houses, etc., that are directly related to solving the issue of gender-based violence, of giving care, administering care to those who have been victimized by it. And one of the stark figures is also the cost of learning time lost, which is $14.5 million. And what that means is that, especially for the population, the younger population that is studying, when a girl or a young woman or a boy or a young man has been victimized in that way, the cost of having to delay their studies, having to redo a program because of the emotional and physical duress that they're under, that they're not able to complete their studies, as well as for the dropouts who, because of those have been victims of gender-based violence, they're not able to attain the certification that would get them to higher paying jobs. So all of these costs are part of that $63 million, the household costs. For example, we know that the majority of the household duties are done by women and by girls. So when a woman or a girl is out of the home, having to to receive care because of being victimized by gender-based violence, those household costs are part of it as well. Personal cost, the cost of income loss was $6.5 million. Why? Because whenever someone is a victim of gender-based violence, their source of livelihood for themselves and their families is lost, as well as the perpetrators as well. So it just goes to show that it's not just gender-based violence and gender equality, and thinking and talking about that is not just about a march or a bruise, as I said earlier, but it's also about, it costs money. It costs us money having this problem as a deep-rooted part of our Grenadian society. So that's something that I really want us to think about as we investigate this.
Yeah, that is something I would be following up on. And the way that is contextualized, it really makes sense. And of course, yes, behind those numbers are the very human costs that you just articulated. Now, two final questions. One has to do with your activities in observance of International Women's Day. What will GNOW be doing for that day, and perhaps for the rest of the month of March? What can the national community expect to see from the organization?
If I may, thanks for that question.
Yes.
We are going to be working this year as we reset with other organizations who are part of our umbrella. Girl Guides, for example, they have already started the efforts and have been out. I've seen them on television. I'm sure we all have, working with
for the 100th anniversary. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Because it's important to us to focus on some advocacy right now. We believe in a life cycle approach. And we realize that through the reach of the media, and this is one of our activities, us being here, and we are really grateful to you and your show for having us, because we realize that the furthest reach we can have at this time, furthest penetration, is through the aid of the media. So we are working with you. We are working with our affiliates, members, for example, as we said, Girl Guides associations this year, Soroptimists, we're very well represented. And I just want to share that our immediate past chair, Gloria Payne Banfield, who's also a Soroptimist and a real example to both Tamara and I am, yes, a little older than Tamara, but we don't have enough energy compared to Dame Gloria Payne Banfield. She is really
she was awarded this year.
Use this opportunity to really recognize this fantastic achievement of one of our very, very own, and also, of course, a past chair in service. But I'm saying this because she's very much a part of the Soroptimists, as she is of GNOW. And this year, we have chosen to synergize coming out of our own building of the project that Tamara would have spoken about, where we have worked with several other organizations here in Grenada, national organizations. We are going to be carrying on more of a conversation via social media, attending other functions, working with the Ministry of Social Development where we can with their activities, and then we will continue to build on what we have begun to do. All of that set of activities, I think Tamara would have shared on them earlier this year, only within the last month.
Absolutely. Tamara, and of course, you just added that. Now, finally, call to action. How can the national community get involved? Already you have the broad-based coalition of women's groups in Grenada who are part of GNOW, but what about other citizens? How can they get involved in their work?
Yes, so there is room on board for all. The work is vast, the responsibilities are vast, but also the support is vast. So the Grenada National Organization of Women is an umbrella organization. And right now, I do want to make a call for the member organizations who are a part of GNOW to get on board in a more interactive way. So we have about 15 member organizations, and some of them are at the forefront, and there are also others that are not as active. So I'm going to make a call to our public. If you are part of an organization that has a women's arm, we also are in allies with our men as well. But for the women arms of different organizations, if you do not know if your organization is a part of GNOW, ask a question. You know, go to your president, go to the chairs of your organizations and say, do you know if we are a member organization of the Grenada National Organization of Women? And if not, you can definitely join us. We can also be reached on online on Instagram. It's gnow.gd, and on Facebook is the Grenada National Organization of Women. So you can send us a message and say that I would like to volunteer. So you can volunteer for a myriad of activities that we will have throughout the year to be a part of accelerating action for gender equality, as well as quite a number of other focuses that we have. So the door is open. The message board is open to join us because there's a lot to do, and we really want the support of our Grenadian public to be able to do it.
Absolutely, very important, because an organization is only as strong as those who contribute to its survival and sustenance, and especially in the context of voluntarism. Voluntarism is indeed a labor of love, especially in this era where I think technology has caused us to become more individualistic, and people are not as community oriented as we're going to find out in the next segment, as we used to be. The idea of it takes a village to raise a child, that has been challenged in many ways in this period, and we see the consequences of that in real time. Any final comments, ladies, before we get to the next segment?
So my final comment is, as we are accelerating, sisters, we urge you to be known in this region and globally as the most authentic Grenadian, proud, the best, the most loving, the most genuine, the most affirming sisters, women in the world. There are all kinds of surveys for the best smiles, the happiest people. And on our International Women's Day, I want our men, our brothers, our husbands, our sons to say, Grenadian women are number one.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Tamara?
Grenada, Carriacou, PT Martinique, the Grenada National Organization of Women, we are here. We are made up of many other organizations, and we just love being Grenadian. We love the opportunity to live here in Grenada, to work in Grenada, and to advocate for the rights of all Grenadians. So, as Lydia Nande says, Grenada is an amazing place. We want to showcase how amazing we are as human beings. So let's really just love each other, be kind to each other, to really learn the parts of ourselves that may be contributing negatively to our society and to work on it. We're all works in progress. So let us just take this time, even as Saturday, the 8th of March, the International Women's Day comes about. If you know a woman or a girl, and I know that we all do, share a kind word, a smile. And for us as women as well, let us just showcase ourselves to be the amazing persons that we are, and let's just really continue to contribute to our Grenadian society in amazing ways, with kindness, with love, with service, and with volunteerism.
Absolutely. Ladies, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report this week.
Thank you for having us, Kellon.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Viewers and listeners, this is the Bubb Report. We'll be right back for the final segment of the Bubb Report.
Tell us, a commissioner of police, tell a politician, back off. You have no knowledge of the law. You have no knowledge of law enforcement. You cannot force my officers to do the wrong thing.
But that is somebody's son. That is somebody's child. That is part of a family. And I think that is the part that they are missing out.
Because E and F are apt to be used oppressively.
It's like because we don't see disabled people as sexual beings, which is ridiculous.
You mean they don't want to listen to your version of science? They have their own science. You have your science.
We need to do is teach people to think and not what to think.
Today, it's too bad that everybody do what they want.
If I could forgive Bernard Ford, then I could forgive Bob Morris too. And today, on this day, I no more have anything in my heart for what he did.
The education system has to be very fluid and dynamic because we're living in very different and changing times.
Treating all your citizens equally, all your citizens fairly, recognizing each group, not discriminating against one or the other.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to the second segment of the Bubb Report for this week's installment. Now, education officials in Grenada and the rest of the Caribbean say they are deeply concerned about the circulation and distribution of illegal substances to include alcohol, marijuana-infused foods, and sexual enhancement drugs in secondary schools across the region, including Grenada. Reports suggest that these substances are being brought into school campuses by students, some of whom are distributing or selling them to their peers. Officials say that these drugs pose a significant risk to students' health as well as their behavior and learning outcomes. Of course, in recent times in Grenada, the principal of a secondary school in the St. Andrew Parish released a bulletin on that particular secondary school's website, in which they said, quote, manufacturers are becoming increasingly creative in disguising illegal drugs and making them appear harmless to unsuspecting students. Recently, substances such as ecstasy, edibles, honey packs, and flavored vapes have been circulating in schools in the form of candies, cakes, inhalers, and other treats. Of course, the publication goes on to say these drugs are designed to look and taste like regular snacks, but can have serious health consequences. And of course, this will be the very first installment of an episode where we intend to look at this issue. And we're actually happy to be joined by two people who are very familiar with this issue. And one is Miss Elizabeth Japal of the Drug Control Secretariat in the Ministry of Education in Grenada, as well as Akeem Bradley Williams, again, not Andy Williams, not to be mistaken with Andy Williams, but he incidentally is also the younger sibling to, of blessed memory, the dearly departed Odette Bess Campbell, was my former boss at the Grenada Broadcasting Network. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bubb. Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, this is a very important topic of conversation. And Ms. Japal, I do want to begin with you from the Ministry of Education, from the Drug Control Secretariat. Of course, we have heard for many years people like Inspector singing, "Stay away from drugs." We had Mr. I believe Dave Alexander, who was also doing a lot of that work. And now we have you, and I'm guessing now we will be relying on you. So big picture before we get into the questions that we have here. Can you first and foremost talk about how much of a challenge this issue is for education officials in Grenada? Big picture.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Bubb. So I start with a basic overview on the topic, and then, like you said, we would narrow it down and get down to specifics. Now,
yes,
we must be mindful that the issue of drug use or substance use dates back to prehistorical and ancient civilization. History would tell us that people used drugs way back in time for religious reasons. They use it for medicinal reasons and also for recreational reasons. So the issue is not a new one. It's not a modern one. What is really happening now is that now young people are exposed to even more dangerous drugs. And the people who promote substance use and sale are becoming more crafty in their trade. And that is posing a problem. In addition to all of that, what we are realizing too is that young people in many instances are beginning to normalize substance use. So whereas back in historical era or prehistorical era or ancient civilization, there may have been not laws and legislation per se, but it may have been guidelines governing who use, when they use, how they use. Now we move into a stage where all and sundry believe they can use, even children who are under the ages of 10, because they are exposed. And the issue of normalizing substance use is what is posing a very difficult problem in our society. And even as we move, and then we're going to get into that later on, but the issue now of synthetic drugs and new, what we call NPSs, new psychoactive substances. Now, one of the days when we just dealt with, I'm not saying that they weren't not bad, but when we spoke about alcohol and marijuana, now we are looking at synthetic drugs and new psychoactive substances, of which there, in a recent report from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, or even the Inter-American Drug Abuse Control Commission, where, which two agencies that produce hemispheric drug report, where they look at substance use in the region, the Americas, Europe, etc. And what we are realizing is that more and more young people are using stronger, more potent drugs. And then it's resulting in many more drug-related ailments and psychosis, etc., and resulting in deaths, for example, a drug like fentanyl, which is very deadly. So that is what the scope of what we're dealing with. The nuances of the transition from traditional drugs into new psychoactive substances.
Psychoactive, Very well. That's interesting. Mr. Williams, let me bring you in. You're Akeem Bradley Williams. Of course, you are a youth parliamentarian representing the constituency of St. George Northeast, and congratulations on the youth election, and of course being sworn in this week. At the time that this program will be aired, you would have been sworn in. I believe it's the inaugural swearing in that they're having there in Parliament. Now, there is always the perception, you hear that, some of the senior folks, they don't really understand young people, and young people as if, some young people feel as if, senior folks, more seasoned folks with life experiences are patronizing. And so sometimes I think it's also to get a youth perspective, which is why we invited you here. So what do you think motivates some of what Ms. Japal was speaking of there, the attraction to those synthetic drugs? Is it peer pressure? Is it what young people are exposed to on their social media accounts? Of course, now I feel as if websites like TikTok are doing more education, shall we say miseducation, really, informal education. It's not really formal than the traditional school systems. So talk to us about the types of influences that are occurring that will push a young person to want to engage with the synthetic drugs here that Ms. Japal spoke about.
So thank you, Dr. I think it's quite important, and we would appreciate that. I think this is where sometimes the younger version of the population and the older version tend to not agree on some things. One would appreciate that as young people, we see the world and we experience the world through a slightly different lens. Our experiences are different, the culture around us is different. And yes, we see from time to time that our parents would say, you know what, when I was young, this was the case with me and this is the experience. But we would appreciate that the world we live in today is a completely different world than it was many years ago. To start off from this, I think what we have noticed is that we have seen that we have gotten to a place where the stigma, we have gotten very desensitized in many respects, as you mentioned, to what was considered a negative outlook on drugs. So we have gotten to a place where, one, it's either more promoted because now we have the social media, we have the TikTok, we have the Instagram, we have the Facebook, and the different platforms that are promoting it. To add insult to injury, we are a people of music, we are a people of dance, we are a people of rhythm and culture. And we have also seen, and when we've looked at the evidence, we've seen that these different things, when they infiltrate themselves into our culture, our morphed or evolved culture as young people within the Grenadian context, we have seen that it has now smoothened the outlook and has made it very easy and attractable for young persons to want to participate. So one of the days when for our parents, we hear the stories of their parents threatening them and making look at this as a dangerous thing. Now we have way more access to information. And so you find that with our young people, we have to go this step further than to just say to them that you shouldn't have it or this isn't necessarily good. We have to get down into the crux, into the details, and we have to educate. I think that's one of the big things. I'm a big advocate for what the culture has gotten to. And sadly, it appears as though by nature of where we're located in the world between North and South America, it seemed to appear as though that we are a lot of collateral damage for the transiting of those drugs across the globe.
And let me bring back Mr. Pal here. Of course, you heard Mr. Bradley Williams here saying that we are sort of in between North and South America, that transit point for narcotics and things like that, and we have become collateral damage. Is that a sentiment that you associate yourself with, Ms. Japal? Is that a sentiment you agree with? Yes.
That definitely. The issue of our porous borders, falling, like my brother said, between North and South America, Caribbean islands being used as transshipment centers. Of course, we are most vulnerable for the emergence of all these new drugs. And in addition to that, we are still considered somewhat third world countries. So many times we would hope that the information that we really need is reaching us, and we are not like just recipients of pop culture. So we've in there for the most part, many times, we seem not to want to hold on to our own cultural identity, but want to adapt and associate with the popular culture. And as a result of that, like it was mentioned, the popular music, the new genre of music, which if one just has to look at any one of the music videos, and promotion of violence and crime and risky sexual behavior, and of course, substance use.
Yeah. So, Ms. Japal, let us pick up on something you said earlier, and that has to do with the nature of the synthetic drugs. You mentioned this is the synthetic drugs and how different it is to traditional substance use and things like that. What should folks be looking out for? Because I saw that circular from one of the schools, and again, we are not here in the business of stigmatizing schools, because I think there is a tendency to think that some schools do it and others don't. Let us not be hypocritical. It happens everywhere. Some of your children are underneath parents. Okay, I'm going to use that word. But let us talk about who are supplying these things? Are these spin-offs from the traditional drug suppliers? Who is supplying them, and what should parents be looking out for?
Right. So I would get to that, but I'm happy that you mentioned it's not any one school, because many times we are in denial as to the school. Some we have reporting, sometimes we have underreporting, and then in all fairness to some school administration, sometimes they just don't know. But I often say to people in my how many years, 15 years of being in the drug control secretariat, I cannot say that there has been one school that has been spared from the tentacles of the drug phenomenon. Like I say, in some cases there's underreporting. In some cases, maybe some people know and others don't. But for the most part, every school is affected. And I remember being at a workshop, it must have been in Europe or South America, and nothing has remained with me than what that special line that the presenter said. He said, drugs can be anything, it is everywhere, and it affects everyone. So even if it may not affect you, Dr. Bubb, directly, you may know someone, a neighbor, a family member or so, who is affected by the issue of substance use and misuse and drug dependency. So you might ask, what should parents be looking out for? I think that's the question you just asked.
Yes.
What should we be looking out for? Because the dealers the proponents of substance sales and trafficking and so, they have become very crafty. They are using non-traditional methods, such as, well, the post to a certain extent, but even more so the online methods of the dark web and the deep net, or vice versa. So a lot of us, older parents who are not very au fait with the technology, we can be left behind because our children might be, online, seem to be doing something that seems natural and normal, and we're not aware that they're actually involved in some deep, dark activity. So the issue of drugs via sales via the internet is one of the emerging trends where we, the older heads, are getting left behind because we're not sure what they're doing. We're not sure what they're looking at. And like I said, these people who are, involved in the trade, they know how to capture the audience of the young people. They know how to coerce them. They know how to get into the psyche and make them believe what they want them to believe, inclusive of they make them believe that there's some benefits to the issue of substance use when really there isn't. So we have moved away, like I said, from the traditional into these new substances, which can be anything. Because when you speak about new psychoactive substances, and you're talking about over 800, according to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime report of 2021, there were over 800 such drugs. Now, how do you come up with 800 new drugs? And it all has to do with is that you're using chemicals and substances that may normally be used maybe in the home, maybe as paint products, etc. And these substances now then are done what we call adulterated, mixed with other substances to create these new drugs. And most times, parents, us, we the adults, we may be the last ones to know because we don't know what to look for. Let's take, for example, the issue of electronic cigarettes and vapes. We're in the era of technology, so students have their thumb drives or their flash drives, etc. As a parent, you might see the strange-looking object and you think, oh, it's a flash drive, but it might just be a vaping
with
device.
the SBAs on it, and they will tell you they have the SBAs on it.
The SBAs,
yeah.
Yeah, so it's
go ahead.
Between a rock and a hard place. You want them to do their work, but you're not sure if that's what they're doing is really what they're supposed to be doing. Because like I said, the new phenomenon, the new nuances of the way things are done, it's very difficult. And even for governments to come up with legislations and restrictions and all of that, how do you even pinpoint these drugs? And that brings me to another issue of the early warning systems. If in countries like us, we do not have what is called an early warning system on drugs, where our ER unit and our police unit, drug squad, etc., the drug control secretariat, the Ministry of Health, if we don't have the mechanism and the technology to decipher and decode, then we are left on the back burner while the world continues to spin around this in this negative issue.
And that's a very important point that you make there in respect of the divide. There is a digital divide in respect of understanding of how young people use their devices, and many times, parents just give them the phones and say, oh my goodness, he can juke this button, and and well, that's what they're showing you. They're not showing you anything else. But I want to bring back Mr. Williams here. Mr. Williams, I want you to also speak to the whole issue of the music, and of course, both of you mentioned the music here. Now, one of the bigger influences now, in my day, we had dancehall, we had the Red Rat, and we had the Buju Banton, but now, these young people have the Cayman 6. Now, dancehall, of course, has always been dancehall in respect of what it was promoting. But Cayman 6, that musical influence, seemed to also be connected to those vices that we're talking about today as well.
And that's one aspect, because I mean, there are those who young persons among us who would be drawn to the dance or the Trinidad dance or that kind of a culture. But we still have a rich young population who is very much drawn to American hip hop. And again, it's no secret that a lot of these songs, because they play in our minds. I remember if you would turn to one of the old songs from Russia, I would say, what we feel our mind becomes our characteristic. And I think that shows, because music doesn't ask for permission. You hear a beat, anyone else, we are Caribbean people, and before a beat comes, we flow with it automatically. So it means that music is actually getting you to do something without your invitation or you giving it permission at all. So when we then come and add lyrics on that, we now have a vehicle and a medium that is bringing forward a message that if I were to speak it, or somebody were to speak it or transmit it to you, it wouldn't do the same thing. So that is the dangerous thing that we've gotten to. So gone are the days, I remember that our musicians and the persons who were involved in the culture at the time, there was a lot of effort placed on ensuring that there were guardrails and there were barriers and there were boundaries separating, so that what was adult entertainment and accept the fact adult mind was somehow not necessarily dispensed to a younger generation. So much so that you would find that young persons, after they've grown old, when they've fully discovered what it meant, they're shocked. No, we no longer having that. It's coming as raw. It's coming as it is to a generation that is readily available. Now, one of the pressing things I think why we are in a bit of a rut is simply because, and I've been drawn to this Ubuntu philosophy as of recent. I am because we are. Yes, amen to that. When we look at our culture, so technology is only part of it. When we look at our culture, you will realize that more and more, and year after year, our culture is moving away from that sense of community, and we're moving into that sense of individualism. So whereas it took the community and it took those in the community who maybe are sharper minds to look out and to pay attention, everyone is looking after their own selves. So no longer do we have that all of society approach, those guardrails, those foundations were there, those unspoken rules and regulations within our society that ensure that kept young persons focused on the straight and narrow. We moved. So now persons no longer want to tell their child. So people might be aware that this is happening, but they probably won't say anything. So yes, not only do we have the infiltration of the media, the popular culture, not only do we see it being easily accessible and being normalized in the music, but no, there is nothing preventing it. So what I like to say is that in some respects, we have lost our culture because we have not put enough effort, in my opinion, to preserve those societal foundations that kept our society going. Instead, we have imported a North American or a Western culture that doesn't seem to be serving us in any form or fashion.
Absolutely. And I will bring back Ms. Japal here. Ms. Japal, in all of the work and research you've been doing, have you been seeing a correlation between the music and drug use?
Right. So, Dr. Bubb, in my line of work, our line of work in drug control, we are guided by what we call evidence and scientific data. So it would be remiss of me to sit here and use anecdotal reporting to answer your question.
Yes.
However, I think anecdotal information probably could be the 0.1 or 0.0 towards the scientific method. Outside of empirical evidence, outside of scientific data, outside of research, as a drug control officer, I cannot discuss the correlation. The correlation I can discuss is that of anecdotal reporting. And of course, we're in the environment, we're not sitting outside of the environment. And that's where research becomes very important. So we talk about current data, we talk about data that is relevant, data that is credible, data that can be validated. And when you put all these words together, then you come up with evidence-based research. And outside of the proper methodologies to find out what is going on, we cannot say for sure, even if it seems to be staring us in the eye. And that's why I'm saying again, it's very important that we liaise with our academic institutions, especially in small and developing states like ours, where we cannot readily fund research. Then we have to liaise with our academic institutions, partner with other agencies, and that's why we look at the interagency or interagency coordination or cooperation. Because, like my brother just said, Mr. Williams, no one agency, one unit, no one department can deal with the myriad and the plethora of issues that are associated with the phenomenon of drug use. It is not just about ingesting drugs and becoming dependent, but then it spirals into other things. Just this week, a parent called and she's saying, look, her son, who is a fourth former, is behaving out of character, and he's even, physically harming his younger siblings. Because when you use drugs, it leads to anxiety, it leads to depression, it causes other things to happen in your brain, it leads to psychosis. And as a result, we have to have the appropriate intervention to deal with this. So initially we talk to schools, we say, okay, let's deal with the universal prevention, where from a very young age, I'm thinking maybe we should start as young as preschool and let children know that the dangers of substances to their body. Because by the time they enter higher level primary school or low level secondary school and they're already involved, then we have to look at now specific and indicated prevention methods. And sometimes by that time it's too late, because the issue with substance use is that it has a lot to do with people's tolerance. So for one person, a child might use substance and you may never know. Another one, from that initial experimentation, they come down with a psychosis, which could lead to lifetime dependency or even death. And this is why this is such a intricate matter. This is why it is so important that we continue our primary prevention, universal prevention method, and also incorporate the entire ecological model. When we speak about substance use, we look at the individual. What can happen to that person? What if that person is already genetically predisposed for drug psychosis because of the genetic makeup? But then we can't look at the individual in isolation. The individual come from a home. What is the modus operandi of the home? In some cases, children, I have worked with children before that said, Miss, I didn't know it was wrong to bring marijuana in school. At home, we cook marijuana with rice. That's a normal staple. So then you have to get into the psyche and let the child know that what you're doing is not acceptable in school. I have had parents say to me, I didn't mind him smoking, but you drinking? So then what about the parents who normalize smoking? But see, Dr. Bob, I see you opening your eyes. These are some of the issues.
That is shocking to me.
Exactly. So it's a lot, it's a marathon, and that's what we say. The issue of drug is multidimensional, it's multifaceted, and therefore we need a interagency, all on sundry, all hands on deck, the community, the home, the institutions, all of society, for us to come together to address the issue. There's The Drug Control Secretariat alone with its 2 officers will not be able, and I would say will not be able, even in my wildest imagination, will not be able to do it alone. We must include all our agencies. Like Mr. Williams said, there was days when the grandparents would look and the neighbor would looking and look out for your child. And we have to go back to these days because, again, as I interface with the region and the international community, whether Europe, South America, etc., you can become despondent because you hear the issues and it's all over, and you wonder, is there something that we are not doing correctly? And it brings you to the point that no one group can do it. We all have to come together. Like I say, look at the levels of prevention, and if we start with the primary prevention, where you introduce a topic to young people when they are very young, as to how young they should be, that's another debate. It's very debatable. But if you introduce it to them, that's how they know if they climb a tree and they're not careful, they would fall. Or if they put their hands in fire, they'll get burnt. Then I think we need to start the education way earlier, because trust me, Dr. Bubb, when they get to the point that they're already using and they're already dependent, and again, I want to stress here that we avoid using the word addiction. We speak about drug dependency and problematic substance use, and we use those kind of terms. When it gets to that stage, especially in cultures and societies and countries like ours, where we do not have a comprehensive drug treatment unit, then it becomes very difficult for us to help the people that we need to help, because then we need to talk about tertiary prevention, which is treatment, and that can be very difficult. So I believe in the universal prevention, primary prevention, before they start even using or are introduced, so that they will develop the skills to say no and know how to say no in a meaningful way.
And I just want to quote from the Minister of National Security in Trinidad and Tobago, or neighboring jurisdiction, and this is what he said in my research for this program, and this was in 2023. He said, from data available to us for the period January 2018 to December 2021, there was 7,000 or so drug-related arrests and persons as young as 15 years convicted of these charges. He then goes on to say, and that was very disturbing to me, he said, I have confirmed the report that there are children of this nation as young as 8, 9, and 10 years old who are on the streets at the wee hours of the night and morning, and who are already engaged in the use of marijuana, gambling, using alcohol, even those at the ages in Trinidad and Tobago, I'm sure in other parts of the world, unquote. Of course, that's the Minister of National Security in Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, this is not in Grenada, but that's in our neighboring country. Any thoughts on that?
Dr. Bubb, like they say, if your neighbor's house is on fire, wear tears. The data that we collect in Grenada at the Drug Control Secretariat, there really little difference to any of our neighboring territories, whether it's St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Dominica, Grenada. There's a lot of synergy in what we are seeing. And that's why it's very scary, because how far away is Trinidad from us? 35 minutes on an airline, on a plane to get there. Yeah. So sometimes, like I say, if we do not carry the relevant research, we may not know. And to carry the relevant research, we need the relevant resources, the human resource, the budgetary allocation, etc., so that we can do that. Our last school survey dates back to 2013, when the entire CARICOM region we all did this secondary school drug prevalence survey. It costs a lot to do nationwide survey. So the office, my unit, has recently engaged with the UNDP Carry Secure project, and we are looking to carry out a school survey again in the 2025. But the funding was partially government of Grenada, supported by the UNDP, and needless to say, what I'm sure you know about the narrative, where the US has put a 90-day hold on all the spending and all of that. It just might mean that we may not even be able to carry out the research to find out what's going on. And that's troubling, because like I said, anecdotal reports are showing us that not only are our young children exposed to marijuana and alcohol and probably cocaine like in the past, but they're now exposed to all these new synthetic substances. They're now exposed to new psychoactive substances that affect their brains. And in some instances, and for some children, it takes that very first experimentation to cause them to end up with a drug-induced psychosis. It's not about, okay, after my 5th time or my 10th time. For some young people and some adults as well, the very first time they experiment with a drug, they end up with a drug-induced psychosis. In addition to that, even when sometimes young people think they're using one drug, they don't know. Most drugs are adulterated, or we say infused with other substances. So as a Inter-American Drug Abuse Control Commission and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime gathers data from the Trinidad, Grenada, all of us, and put together for a historic report, there are very few differences in what obtains in the region. In that, you carry out a survey, you ask young people, what drug, why are you here for treatment? What is the drug you're using? And the person might say, okay, cocaine, or they might say marijuana, or they might say, I use alcohol. But little do they know, when a test is done, there are married up other substances in there. And that's a threat. That's the dangerous threat, because we are not sure what people are using. And then we don't have the resources to do the appropriate testing. We cannot ascertain. And when we don't have an early warning system on drugs and a toxicology unit that is equipped with modern technology and equipment so that we could decode and decipher what's going on, we are at our wit's end.
Let me bring back Mr. Williams. Let me bring you back in here, sir. Let's see. Just give me 1 second. Yes, Mr. Williams, I'm going to bring you back in here, sir. Is there anything else you wish to add to what Ms. Japal just, Ms. Japal's conversation here is so revealing. I'm learning so much about a lot of these patterns and even the perception as well. Mr. Williams, is that consistent with what you've been seeing on the ground as well?
100%. There is no other way to put it. What I'll say is I am not in a school anymore. I'm not working with it, but the reality is that when I was in school, you would wonder how these things are in nighttime when I was in going to Tamsi, and so you would see these things prevalent in what we call edibles. Very, 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 very prevalent. All of you would be in school, and sometimes you would see certain students looking around with bloodshot eyes, and you're wondering what's happening, and it is very concerning. And for me, it's even more concerning because as we've heard from the anecdotal evidence that is presented, it said that it's happening from a very, very early age. That is the most concerning thing for me, because we know for a fact that when we look at children, one, that it brings us to developing, and the primary purpose for being in school is to be able to go and be able to make that contribution. Now, it means therefore that not only are we seeing that might be impairing their ability to learn, as was mentioned by Ms. Japal. Now we're seeing that from, and now I want to put on my community nutrition hat, because what we see over time is that unless we can make some of us significant intervention, and we don't have the resources, we don't have the facilities to help treat with these things effectively, what we then see is that these can then go all the way to adulthood, and then we have the societal ills. Now we see that children now are the perception that they can't learn, and then there is nothing productive for them to do, and then we have that cycle repeating itself. That to me is one of the big concerning factors, is always the domino effect of what happens because it's happening so early. The reality, I think, is, and I can go back to when I was a student, is that every household, every family is not the same. And in as much as some parents may try their very best, to bring their children on the straight and the narrow and to educate them, sometimes we are going back into a quote-unquote marketplace of learning, where we have different parents who are different able, and Ms. Japal alluded to it very, 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 very clearly, in that you can find yourself in an environment, and because one family is used to it and you may not necessarily be used to it, then that curiosity that we know that is innate to us as human beings, and especially in childhood, then shows up on center stage. And then you find that at some point it is tried, and you do not know. That's the weird thing. We cannot look at someone and see where they are mentally. We cannot look and see what's happening with them psychosocially. So we're looking at a person, and in the moment of just experimenting, one experimenting moment, that can be all is required to see it. And that's why I'm concerned.
Let us talk about peer pressure. Now, one of the things in background research on this issue here is that I found, again, anecdotally, that you have young people themselves who are the ones that are introducing a lot of these substances into the school system, right? Again, anecdotally here.
Yeah.
So it does appear as if there appears to be some buy-in from some of the young people as well. Yeah. That it's that the adults are influencing them, yes, but they in turn become agents of what the adults are doing.
So that comes back to a very popular thing that we hear a lot, and you go to school and then I'm thinking back to my school days, and I'm thinking back to teachers bringing the who am I question and the question of values and self-esteem. And oftentimes, because they're your peers, I think we take for granted that our peers may not necessarily know where we're weak and they may not see our faults. And we will, as human beings and as young children, we can be quite crafty ourselves. Yeah? I think we tend to forget that me being a victim of trying to fit in so many times, because you leave and you come from different houses, and sometimes you leave not knowing. And it can be a simple reason, and sometimes we have parents who might be extra hard on their children. We don't know what the households are. And that's one of the things that we have to consider. So you leave whatever your household you're coming from, and then you're going into an environment where that is who you're associating with, that is who you're drawn to. And then you want to be able to fit in. And in the desire to fit in, you find that this is the condition on the table. If you don't do this, then you're not seen as one of us. You're not seen as cool. But that is something that I think a lot of work still has to be done on. It is very difficult to do with two persons, of course, and we understand the challenge, of course, with Ms. Jappel, and so within that secretariat. And so again, I'm going to say it does require an all of society approach from us, specifically outside of the context of illicit drugs. As a nutritionist, I am significantly concerned with the way that alcohol has now infiltrated our society from the very young to the very old. That to me is a significant concern, because as I look at the scientific evidence, and now we see that we have new results from the last Surgeon General that's saying that they want to consider putting labels on alcohol because of the type of cancer. Now, what is happening in those moments when you're actively having these things impact with your brain and impact with the time? Because it's same 24 hours in a day that we isolated, focus on the phone. If we're not focused on the phone, we're focused on having a good time and having that social kind of outcome that is then impacting us down the road. That is a big concern for me as a youth parliament representative for Central Northeast, because that's the future. Yeah. We can't take for granted that the persons who are going to be affected isn't a potential surgeon who we might need, or a potential doctor or lawyer who we might need. And so I honestly believe, and this is my philosophy, if we see every person, every child in our community as being someone that we can depend on, or see being someone who can make a significant contribution to society, may not be yet, but at some point, because that was my story, then we will care a little bit more. And as the whole of society, we will take a greater initiative to want to make sure that our neighbors' children and those we care about in our surroundings are cared for.
And taking a village to raise, it takes a village to raise a child. I remember back in my days growing up, both on 4 roads. Yes, I spent some time on 4 roads as well. If I did something wrong in the schoolhouse, before I got home, everybody knew what I did wrong, and I would get punished both in the schoolhouse, on the way to the house, and when I got home. So that's how it was back in the day. But now, if you were to, correct a neighbor's child, don't talk to me, child. Don't talk to me, child. They want to cuss you, and it's a different culture, and you pointed that out. So, Ms. Jappel, you just unmute the mic because we were getting an echo from you. But I want us to talk about the whole question of the the suppliers and the supply chain and what that looks like, and perhaps the work that the Secretariat does with the Royal Grenada Police Force and community policing and other partners in the community to conduct surveillance, just to see, again, as you said, you're very limited in respect of the resources you have. But again, anecdotally, is there like supply chains? Have people gotten very creative with how they're moving those things around? What are you seeing?
The chain, the network evolve. That young people themselves also engaged in the activity. It's not a certain cohort or those from a particular socioeconomic background. I remember an incident where just before CXC, a group of the most intelligent students from a particular school had a retreat so that they could, review their material for exam. The brightest group, among the brightest set of students. And it was a subject area that takes a lot of, hard work to achieve. Not like every subject is not important. And during that retreat, one of the youngsters made a cake or a brownie or so and shared. It shows that even among the most so-called intelligent students, that the urge is there as well. So we cannot go along the road of labeling, and because you come from this household, and because your father was a no good. No. And that's why I'm happy Mr. Williams said we need to treat every single individual with dignity and respect. We need to be mindful that the issue surrounds us all, and it can be right in our household, and sometimes we are the last ones to know. Yeah. And we take that all-encompassing approach that it could be anybody's child, including mine, and that we need to look out for all the children, the nation's children, then we would know that, okay, the issue is not an isolated issue. So to answer your question about the network and the chain, it's very complicated because you cannot look at someone and know that they might be involved. The one you might think, oh, this is an A student. This child performs at a high level. This child is involved in most activities at school. This child is a teacher's pet. That might still be the child who's associating with the drug dealer and bringing ganja, marijuana, brownie fudge, whatever it is on the school compound. So yes, along with the Royal Grenada Police Force, especially the Community Relations Department, we do a lot of collaboration. We would go to schools together and share with the students, do presentations, engage the different units. We work along with drug squad. We work along with the financial intelligence unit because there might be an issue where a child suddenly has a lot of money or is exposed to certain material, latest gadget, and you might be wondering where they get it. And that's why I say again, not just the parent, but we all have to be looking out. When something looks like it's not right, and something, let's dig deeper. And if we're not sure, let's call somebody who might be better able to go deeper and find out what is going on. Because most times we see it, it may not be a glaring red flag, but you see something that looks different. This child suddenly starts coming to school late. This child is in need, but he or she is not taking any kind of, they're not caring much about their parents anymore. This child is leaving school at a certain time, just disappearing. This child is to perform at a top level, but now the grades are dropping. So it's not only about the dark lips and the red eyes, because those can be normal. I have red eyes. It doesn't mean I'm smoking, no. So we can't even look at those physical traits, but we have to look deeper as to behavioral changes. What have you seen that is different in this youngster that wasn't so before? And if we can spot these things and identify them early as teachers, as administrators, as community activists, as parents, if we're able to see these things very early, we might be able, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to assist the child. But as it relates to the chain can be anybody. It can be a very young child. It can be male. It can be female. Because gone are the days when we used to think, oh, the boys are the ones drinking and smoking and involved in drugs. The young ladies are also involved. And it's the same throughout the region. As we meet for regional meetings or as we discuss during our in-person or virtual meetings, the nuances are the same. The ages are dropping. When I just started in drug control, we were like the average age of substance use was 13 or 12.5 based on the school survey. But now you're hearing a lot of children younger than that, 8, even as young as 7. And then when we would expose them to things like a shandy carry, because we think, oh, it's just 0.5%, that's nothing. But that's where we ourselves introduce them to acquire the taste for these substances. And studies have shown that if a person has never experimented or used drugs by the age of 25, there's a high probability that he or she may not. Not that I say it's impossible. But when they start much younger than that, then it becomes way more difficult to treat the issue. When I say treat, not necessarily medicate, but to find appropriate intervention that would work for them, because no one method works for no one child. And when we don't have a health code or we don't have a drug code where we can look at the comprehensive nature of drug use and substance use, and not just look at it as an offense, as a criminal offense, and deal with it in a punitive way. But when we start to look at the public health approach and the human rights approach, and start looking at ways we can help our children, then we are really starting to address the issue, hitting the tip of the iceberg. But there's a lot we have to do. And like I said, parents alone cannot do it. The staff of the Drug Control Secretariat alone cannot do it. The Prime Minister alone cannot do it. We all have to come together. Non-governmental organizations, state facilities and organizations, all in surgery, all have to come together and, like I say, be vigilant. When we see things that look a little bit abnormal or it doesn't seem right, let's dig into it. Let's try to find out what's going on so that we can save our population. Because if we don't, we are going to lose them. Because like I said, the drugs are creeping in. Fentanyl, for example, is very deadly. When at a meeting last year, I heard that in the US and Canada that they had deaths within a year over the population of Grenada, then that scared me, because I'm saying to myself, what is this? And again, like I say, if we don't have an early warning system on drugs to identify new and emerging drugs, to be able to treat people and not necessarily medicate, but to do the psycho-educational programs with them and have a comprehensive drug program where you have a psychiatrist, a psychologist, where we have counselors in school, but some of them are stretched thin. And a lot of people think the Drug Control Secretariat is there just to do drug program, but not realizing that we fall under 5 pillars: interagency coordination, institutional strengthening, international cooperation. So we have to meet our mandate to provide our data to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the European Monitoring Center on Drug and Crime, CARICOM, etc. We have a lot to do. So I know we are wrapping up. I doubt we're already wrapping up, but I'm still saying that let's all come together, collaborate, coordinate, cooperate, so that we can address this issue and find ways and intervention strategies that will be effective. And like I say again, I believe it stems back to primary prevention. Primary prevention, in that before our young ones are even exposed, hopefully, we are able to introduce them to skills that will help them to be able to say no when they need to say no, and say yes, and to make healthy choices and wise choices.
Mm-hmm. What should parents and teachers look out for in this issue, and how can they reach the Drug Control Secretariat if they notice a child is behaving untoward?
Yes, if you notice that, of course you can go to your nearest health clinic, because once you started to notice, you may not know it's a psychosis, but you see abnormality in behavior, you can reach to your nearest health clinic, or you can call the chief education officer or your district education officer, and they will then transmit the information to us. We might be able to guide them, because many times a lot of parents don't know that their facilities, limited as it is, we do have some facilities in Grenada. So at the Mange Health Facility, we have a daily walking clinic that runs from 9 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon, and that's more psychoeducational. It doesn't have to do with detoxification and injectables, injections and medications and so on, but psychoeducational. A lot of parents don't know that. But of course, the students would have to be 17 plus. But there is also a day clinic at the General Hospital in St. George's, where if a parent notices that something seems abnormal with a child, they can contact the Monge facility, and the doctor, they will make a recommendation for this child to see the child psychologist at the General Hospital as well.
Very well. That is good to know. That's very beneficial. Mr. Williams, I'm going to bring you back, sir. Is there anything else you wish to add as we close this segment?
No, I think Ms. Jacqueline did a phenomenal job. She was very clear and articulate. I would only but emphasize that all of these things really happen outside of our awareness. And I think as parents, it's a good place to encourage us that not because we're a little older or we're of a different generation doesn't mean that we can't learn. I hear our Prime Minister say that age shouldn't be a restrictor of us learning, and I really want to pause it with that today. There is a lot of information on YouTube. So outside of what we're sharing today, they call it the Great University of YouTube, that you can go on their person who do podcasts, and then they will talk about things that you can look to. Some of us may have smart TVs, may have Alexas. Pick up the remote, ask the question, see what you can get. We also have the ministry, and so that's available. But paying attention is the single most important thing that you can do, because what you're actually looking for, in most cases, by and large, would be those behavior changes. That's going to be outside of the ordinary. I think that we cannot leave that part to itself. I'm really coming to understand today, these days actually, that anything that we really just leave for itself tends to go towards disorder. And so now we have a sense of awareness that this is a reality. And so to parents who have young children, who have young teenagers or young adults in your homes, it's something that you'd want to strengthen that knowledge base on in some way. Any knowledge, I think, would be better at this place than not having any at all. But ultimately, I believe that this is going to put us in a much better position for the future, and to be able to stand in the gap for those children who we care about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Is that part of your platform? What's your platform on another issue going into the Youth Parliament?
So going into Youth Parliament, we really hope to address this root cause issue that I mentioned before, and it is the lack of community. We went to our community and we realized that this me, myself, and I culture is what has pervaded everything. And so it is my philosophy that, as I mentioned in the beginning, that we can only be because of everyone else playing their part in our society. So we aim to attack that head on. I believe that any promotion and any activity with the intention of putting communities together is going to make, even if it's a small dent, but it's going to make a dent no matter what. And it's still better than us doing nothing and allowing entropy to take place. Any system left to itself will ultimately result in disorder. And so that's a principle that we're going to be moving forward with. Trying to create more avenues, seeing where we can collaborate, who we can talk to. It might mean I may need to pay Ms. Jacqueline a visit the office, see how we can collaborate. But there is work to be done, and it's very much needed.
I'm sure your sister would be very proud of you, sir. Very, very proud of you. I can hear now. Speaking in my head. Ms. Japal, we'll go over to you now as well for some closing comments.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bob. And my closing comments, I think, will go to parents. Parents, you are the ones that your children live with. You are the first role model. Do not allow someone else to be a role model for your child, because you may not want to know who, you may not be pleased with the role model that they will select. The social media influencer or a pop artist, a musical artist. You be your child's role model, be that first role model. Monitor the behavior that you want to see in your child. Let them know what are wrong, what the things that are wrong and the things that are right. Have open communication with them. You do not have to be an expert. Children really don't want to be bothered about how mommy look or if mommy pretty. When you're young, you just when mommy or daddy speak, it's like gospel, and next is your teacher. So I'm speaking to kind of like parents and teacher, be a role model, but most of parents, be a role model, monitor activities. That child should not, a young child should not be able to go out and come back as he or she well pleases. This young child should not be at every social activity that everywhere the drum beats, he or she should be there. I remember as a student, I was an athlete back in my day, and you had to be home 6. Whether it was intercall, sports meet, and I always had to collect my medal the next day at school because no excuses for reaching home after 6. So we have to start to reinstill these values in our children. Stay informed. You know, like Mr. Williams mentioned, there's a social media. I mean, not all the information is valid and correct, but there are some sources of good information. Let's get some of that. Stay informed. And when you're not sure, ask for help. Reach out to someone. There's always someone there who is willing to help. Like I said, you have your district nurse, you have the community teacher, you have the education officer, you have that elderly lady, that grandmother in the society, in the community that has a wealth of knowledge. Let's tap into these areas and not just isolate ourselves. And let's not hide the issue, because trust me, even if you think it's you alone going through it, you might be shocked to know a lot of us are going through it. We're faced with the issues ourselves. So don't isolate yourself. Don't hide in a corner. Ask for help, and there are people there who are willing to help you. At the Drug Control Secretariat, we're always willing. Like I mentioned, we have limited resources, but we're always ready to direct someone to other sources of information, whether local, regional, international. We're always willing. We pride ourselves on treating every person with dignity and respect, and applying the public health approach and the human rights approach to the issue of substance use. Because fundamentally, substance use is a chronic health disorder. It is not a crime. It is a chronic health disorder which requires a multidimensional approach towards intervention, healing, and recovery.
Ms. Japal and Mr. Williams, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report this week. This is a very, very important conversation. Of course, we will be having follow-ups with law enforcement partners, RGPF, and all of that, because this is a whole of society issue. As Mr. Williams, you said, it does take a village, and perhaps we need to really revisit those Ubuntu principles that you speak to there. Folks, this has been yet another edition of the Bubb Report. I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, and we'll be back for a full-throated live segment next week where we will be taking your comments. And of course, I'm away this week, but next week we promise you another very important episode where we'll be focusing on other issues affecting Grenada and the national community. I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing everyone a pleasant